This morning is titled Satsang, Gathering for Truth. Satsang. Now I Googled it on Chrome, and that's how I heard it. Satsang. Make a hard G there. Satsang. It's not just satsang. Satsang. It's a Sanskrit word combining satya, meaning truth, and sangha, meaning group. It describes a gathering of people for the purpose of knowing the truth. Satsang is often used when referring to a meeting with a guru or a spiritual mentor. I discovered that we find this in Buddhist temples or people who are following Buddha, that they come together for satsang to gather for the truth. The commitment in a group of this nature is to awaken, to uplift, and to enlighten oneself. In short, it's to know the truth. During satsang, participants read inspiring words, discuss its teachings, meditate, and bring this awareness into daily life. To me, that sounds a lot like church, what we know as church. Attending services or spiritual study groups, also known as Sunday school classes or Bible studies in the church, these groups can be thought of participating in sangha, satsang. This practice can also apply to any group of people that gather to inspire one another and express the truth free from judgment. On Facebook this week, I read this quote: "I have the deepest affection for intellectual conversations, the ability to just sit and talk about love, about life, about anything, about everything. To sit under the moon with all the time in the world, with the full-speed train that's our lives slowing to a crawl. Bound by no obligations, barred by no human limitations. To speak without regret or fear of consequence. To talk for hours about what's really important in life." Unquote. And I admit that appeals to me. I'm searching for that in my life. A satsang can be a group of people gathered to sing, play, or listen to music. All that needs to be there is the intention to inspire one another and tell the truth. A satsang can also be a support group, a book club, a yoga class, or meeting between friends for coffee or conversation. We don't need to be in a place of worship or supervised by an appointed leader to experience the truth. The truth can be found in every moment, and it can be experienced with anyone. Spending time with someone who enlightens us can be as simple as visiting a grandmother or talking with a best friend. There is wisdom to be gleaned from being with people, even when the gatherings are not intentional. Any occasion we are gathered with people who understand and support us can be a spiritual experience. I consider this a form of prayer, even. I believe God is present even in the midst of those everyday occasions, those everyday gatherings. I had this image of God when it was before I went into seminary. I had this image. I kept hearing about people putting God in a box. And I thought, okay, I'm a Billie-shaped box. And you're a box. That's quote-unquote box, you're not a Billie box shaped. But the box called Billie is permeable, and that the Spirit flows in and out. And for each one of you, the Spirit within, it's flowing in and out. God's presence with us is flowing in and out. God's breath is flowing in and out of us at all times. So to me, that's a form of truth-giving, a form of prayer, a form of being with God, even when we're not aware of it in our God-shaped boxes. Or God present in our body-shaped boxes. As I thought about a gathering of folks for satsang, I thought also about the TV show Cheers. Do you remember Cheers? It ran for 11 years on the television with Sam and Diane Carla, Norm, Cliff the mailman, Fraser Crane the psychologist, and others. It was set in a bar named Cheers, where this group of locals met to drink, to relax, and to socialize. The show's theme song was Where Everybody Knows Your Name. Have you heard the story about the man who went to church? A man who didn't go very often and didn't know the rules of the church. In the middle of the service, his cell phone rang. People turned around and looked at him with, let's say, unfriendly faces. A parishioner even said something snarky to him as he left the building. Later that week, he went to a bar. He was enjoying the conversation and the camaraderie around the bar. His phone went off, and no one looked unkindly at him, and no one said anything snarky to him. He was accepted as he was. I read once that sometimes folks feel more at home, more accepted in a bar like Cheers than in church. They are welcomed and not judged by their group of friends in a bar. A satsang, perhaps, in a bar? While gatherings with the intention of communing with spirit, and undoubtedly powerful and inspiring, getting together with people that uplift us by their presence alone is also vital to our well-being. When we recognize all the people we know that support us and enrich us, our lives can become an extended blessing. Sometimes we don't appreciate those around us that we can just be ourselves with. And these can be a satsang with our family and our friends. That's my vision of church, to be a place of truth, a place where we gather to learn about, to share, and to live the truth. A place where support for one another is real and shared. It's a place where our spiritual lives are enhanced, where we grow closer to one another and to God, where we find healing and connection. And let me tell you, as a pastor of several churches in my past, I have seen this not happen, where people would have infighting. I haven't seen it in this congregation, but I've seen it in churches, and it makes me so sad. When I spent the 12 years out at the retreat center, I had mostly women come out there who talked about anything and everything, and they felt so free and non-judged, and I was thankful to offer them that space to be able to do that, to find someplace where they could talk about questions that they had about faith, about church, about God, about Jesus, and not feel judged or wrong or shame on you for that. And they found other people in the community at the retreat center that they could become friends with, and there were many lasting friendships that came from that. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that. I think I've shared Dr. Emoto's book, The Hidden Messages in Water, with you before. I'm not sure. I thought I had. Using a high-speed photography, Dr. Masaru Emoto discovered that crystals formed in frozen water reveal changes when specific concentrated thoughts are directed toward them. He found that water from clear springs and water that had been exposed to loving words show brilliant, complex, and colorful snowflake-like patterns. In contrast, polluted water or water exposed to negative thoughts form incomplete, asymmetrical patterns with dull colors. The implications of this research create a new awareness of how we can positively impact the earth and our personal health as well as the well-being of others. Some of the examples are Mozart and heavy metal music. And when the crystals are put side to side, the Mozart crystals are beautiful, well-formed, and the heavy metal music, yeah, it's not so pretty. It's pretty ugly, actually. Also, I saw crystals from the song Yesterday by the Beatles compared to Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis Presley. Excuse me. And the difference between those two was very similar to Mozart and heavy metal. Dr. Emoto took cards and wrote love and gratitude on a card and placed it in front of a vial of water, distilled water. And then he took another vial of distilled water and wrote the words, "You make me sick." And these are just cards put in front. I'm thinking that there was some energy around that because of whoever wrote the card and what they might have been thinking or experiencing. But the card in front of love and gratitude created beautiful crystals, and the one that said, "You make me sick," they're just so deformed and ugly. And then also, he had crystals where he put a card that said, "Let's do it," and another one that said, "Do it." And they were very, very different. "Let's do it" is like, we're going to do this together, and it formed a beautiful crystal. And the "do it" was more of a command, and it came out as a distorted looking crystal. These were just words placed on a card in front of a container of water. Think about the power we have when we just think negative thoughts about somebody around us. Think about the power in our thoughts when we think good things about people, let alone actually saying the words out loud. I don't know if you've ever been scolded or ashamed and what that feels like. It's just like you kind of want to crunch in. But when somebody compliments you or says something kind, it's like, cool. Oh, that feels good. Mark David is a nutritionist and a psychologist. Mark David first was a nutritionist. He knew what to tell people, he knew how to tell them to eat if they had a heart problem, if they had gout, all kinds of issues. But they kept telling him, I know how to eat, I know what to eat, but I don't know how to do it. So he became a psychologist as well. Well, he and a friend had this experience where they went on a retreat, but not to be retreatants. They were the cooks for the weekend. And the two men decided that every meal they prepared, they would just fill it with love, all the love they could, as they cooked and talked and prepared the meal and prepared the tables. And the people thought that the meals tasted so good until the last meal, when Mark and his friend had a quarrel and they didn't put the love into the meal, and the people realized that the meal didn't taste quite as good. Now, you can take what you want from that. I'm thinking it didn't have the love in it in the same way. There's also, I think it's Buddhist monks create a chocolate, and it's very, very expensive. But when they make it, they just fill it full of love as they're making it. And I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, they just fill it with love. Unfortunately, it's very expensive to buy. But just thinking about these monks. So we have Thanksgiving coming up soon. What if we put lots of love into the meals that we create? Or if we're not cooking, maybe filling the cooks with love as they are preparing the meals. So something to think about over the next week. John 8:32 says, "The truth will set you free." Now, the Jews who claimed to believe in Jesus didn't fully get this because they were descendants from Abraham. What did he mean when Jesus said they would be free? They knew they were free. They were in bondage to no one. Jesus had to go on to explain that he wasn't talking about that kind of freedom. Jesus says that anyone who commits sin is in bondage to sin. I understand sin as being separated from God, from others, or from myself. Sin is not necessarily drinking, overeating, being mean to somebody, or doing some of the awful, evil things that we read about. When we do those, we are separated from ourselves, or from God, or from others. So it's more than just a simple act that we do. It's a separation from God. Satsang calls us to truth. God calls us to a truth that will set us free. I want to read the passage for today again and start back a little farther. I invite you to hear this passage as if you've never heard it before. I'm going to read it out of the Message because of the freshness of the language that can capture our attention. This, let's see. Starting with verse 7. 1 John 4, I'm starting with verse 7. My beloved friends, let us continue to love each other, since love comes from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and experiences a relationship with God. The person who refuses to love doesn't know the first thing about God, because God is love. So you can't know God if you don't love. My dear, dear friends, if God loved us like this, we certainly ought to love each other. No one has seen God ever, but if we love one another, God dwells deeply within us, and his love becomes complete in us, a perfect love. Everyone who confesses that Jesus is God's Son participates continuously in an intimate relationship with God. We know it so well. We've embraced it heart and soul, this love that comes from God. God is love. When we take up permanent residence in a life of love, we live in God and God lives in us. This way, love has the run of the house, becomes at home and mature in us. There is no room in love for fear. Well-formed love banishes fear. Since fear is crippling, a fearful life, fear of death, fear of judgment, is one not yet fully formed in love. My question is, do we really believe this stuff we read in the Bible? 1 John 4:18 says, perfect love casts out all fear. Many folks think that love and hate are opposites. This passage tells us that love is the opposite of fear, because perfect love casts out fear, not hate. It is fear that love overcomes, not hate. Now for that word, perfect love, it seems impossible for us to be perfect, right? Like, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, from Matthew 5:48. Well, perfect, the word perfect in Greek does not mean to be without fault or without defect. It means, in Greek, to make one what she or he ought to be, to bring to a finish, to complete, to be mature. It doesn't mean that we do things right, like perfectionism, which is something that many of us need to work through. Many people in the world need to work through that. It's more like being mature, acting our age, doing what we're called to do at any moment in our lives, to be what and who we were meant to be when we came out of the womb. What if church were to claim truth and love as the overarching and undergirding expectations? To be able to claim truth, speak truth, be truth, and to love without fear, wouldn't that be awesome? To sit and talk in truth and to know there was only love, no judgment as we face one another. I know some folks around us need to find and experience a certain level of healing from a past that's kept us from living lives of truth and love. And when I speak of healing, I include physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and relational healing. As human beings, we are complex. Healing in one area can affect or bring on healing in another. Health in the biblical sense is not simply the absence of disease. We might be pronounced disease-free by a doctor and still be unhealthy. We can think of health in terms of wholeness, balance, and harmony in our lives, our body, mind, spirit, relationships. When one or more of these areas becomes out of balance, it influences our entire being. If a person has a healthy body and a healthy mind, but doesn't get along with other people, there's a lack of total health and wholeness. Mind, body, spirit, and relationships are intertwined. They're interconnected. The state of our spiritual health, our mental, physical health, and the health of our relationships impacts and influences us and other people. I want to share 3 definitions of wholeness that I found. First of all is by Albert Day. He was a pastor who was charged to develop a new program of spiritual growth and personal evangelism to make religion real for people. He started the Disciples of Christ Church. He said health is a combination of our harmonious relationships, spiritual vitality, psychological maturity, and physical wellness. All those things intertwine. Tilda Norberg and Robert Weber, who are both clergy and therapists, say, Christian healing is a process that involves the totality of our being, body, mind, emotion, spirit, and our social context, and that directs us toward becoming the person God is calling us to be at every stage of our living and our dying. Whenever we are truly open to God, some kind of healing takes place because God yearns to bring us to wholeness. When I read that, I thought about the labyrinth. I don't know how many of you have walked the labyrinth. We had a labyrinth out at the retreat center, and I always told people when they put themselves intentionally in the presence of the divine as they walk the labyrinth, they could be doing something else. They could be walking in the woods or driving their car or sitting in a chair at home. But whenever we put ourselves intentionally in the presence of the divine, let me say that again, God is always with us, so it's when we intentionally recognize God's presence in our lives, healing happens. Healing happens. Norman Young, a theologian and New Testament scholar, says, wholeness, health, finding healing does not necessarily mean being released from illness, suffering, weakness, or trouble. Wholeness means living creatively within our limitations. He goes on to say, not wasting our days in envy at the capacities and the capabilities of others, not despairing at the loss of youth and vigor or at the lack of maturity or experience, not giving up when our best efforts produce far less than what we'd hoped, not torturing ourselves with guilt when having to settle for less. For to be fully alive is to be whole, fully alive here and now, as things are now, not yet in the fullness of God's realm, which remains yet in the future. Our goal in the church is to develop and maintain a whole person ministry based on a holistic understanding of human nature versus a compartmentalized view where we fix this or fix that part. Jesus loved the whole person, and I believe his goal was to help each person become whole. Whole person ministry attempts to treat each person as a unity of mind, body, and spirit. It recognizes the close connection between a person's sense of well-being and self-esteem to one's overall health. It understands health as a composite result of emotions and spiritual focus, as well as physical conditions. Health and coming to a place of healing is multidimensional. All of a person's life needs to come into balance for health. Let me tell you, this preacher's hearing this message. I don't know if y'all are, but I'm hearing the message. I'm hearing it. A little out of balance right now. My hope for this congregation and for each person in it and for myself is for everyone to be excited about life, to grow in your relationship with God, with self, and with others, to love and trust, to believe and know that God is present and working in all of our lives. I encourage each one of you to be in prayer for this church, for one another, for me, for the process of healing. I encourage you to be a participant in worship, not just as a bench warmer or a pew sitter. Be involved. Listen, talk, ask questions. Read on your own. Talk to others. Be open to God's healing presence. Live. Live. That's what we're called. That's this great gift we're given. Our scripture for today tells us that God loves us, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. As I was coming over this morning, I was listening to a Christian radio station, and the pastor was talking about if you're taught that that your faith is Jesus plus, then you're not getting the real gospel message. It's not anything plus. It's being who we are the best way we know how. It's a perfect love, a mature love. We're to give love the run of the house, allowing it to become at home and mature in us. We're told that fear is crippling and there's no room for fear. Mature love casts out that fear. May we each grow in that mature love God offers us and calls us to live out on a daily basis. May we, as followers of Jesus, figure out how to do this in truth and love together, gathering together in truth. Satsang. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. I chose this hymn because I have a personal affinity to it, a love for it. It has a special meaning in my own life, and I believe God's grace includes all the love and truth we are called to experience from God and to share out into the world. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. I invite us to stand and sing this song together.